Well, that's the first time I've ever prayed before a podcast, but I think I might make it a normal thing. It's beautiful. We just did a little prayer before the podcast, everybody. Put the love in our hearts and the words in our mouth, right? Hi,
Yep.
Elizabeth. I'm so happy you're here.
Hi.
You are the essential. You are like Wonder Woman. You are like willing Wonder Woman. And I have so many questions about it as willful Wonder Woman over here. So talk to us a little bit about like your story with food before you met me. Let's just, what's the story, Morning Glory?
Yeah, so my first experience was when I was younger, 6 or 7 years old, I think was the first time, was kind of my opening to dieting, that type of thing. I got taken to Weight Watchers,
Oh,
and
we should have gone
then
together, huh?
yeah, that would have been good. And so off and on, I mean, up until my 30s, it was just all kinds of diets,
Mm.
keto, um, intermittent fasting, all kinds. That's just like the tip of the iceberg. But and
How many times do you
then
think you did Weight Watchers?
oh, I don't know, 4 or 5.
Yeah, I was
I
just
don't
doing the
know.
math. I think probably I've done it 6 maybe. I was thinking about all the
Yeah.
journals I had in my house, all the different kinds of Weight Watchers
Oh,
journals I
yeah.
had.
Yeah. Tracking the food.
Right.
Um, and so then in my 30s, my late 30s, I have weight loss surgery.
Mm.
And I thought that was kind of going to be the cream of the crop
Yeah.
and
What made you
all.
decide to
And
do that, do you think?
just because I was at my heaviest points
Mm.
and I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep on living the way I was,
Mm.
because I wanted to be more active and all that type of thing. So I had weight loss surgery. I lost over 100 pounds, and then that pretty much came right back after a couple of years. I kept it off, and then it slowly, gradually just came right back on.
Yeah.
And so
Do you have
then,
any idea about how it came back on? I mean, that's true. That's even what they say about bariatric surgery. I think it's almost what they're saying about Ozempic, that your first 2 years are like really good. And then, I mean, that's
mhm.
what happened with me too. It's like those first 2 years, it was like, oh my MG. And then slowly, and then I could fit more food in and I could emotionally eat again and all these sorts of, do you have any idea, like when you say slowly but surely, do you have any idea of what the surely was?
I think I just became like more inactive as time went on because as the weight goes on, it's less likely that you want to move around and just
Mm.
eating crap, basically.
What were you eating?
Um,
Like cookies
um,
and
yeah,
cupcakes?
I mean, sugar, sugar and flour.
Wow, I wish you
So
were watching on
yeah.
YouTube because I almost spit out my coffee. Yeah. So you really went back to the thing that, did you have any idea about food addiction when like before the bariatric surgery?
Not too much. I'd maybe heard of it, but
Mhm.
nothing like I didn't do any deep dive or
Right.
sugar addiction or anything. So
You were like a
yeah, I
moderation. You're
basically,
like a moderation gal.
yeah,
Like I can have a little, and I think with the bariatric
yeah.
surgery and Ozempic, you actually really can, right? I remember that with bariatric surgery. Like I could have like a little bit of a cookie and
Mhm,
then I was like done and like what, but and then eventually that when
mhm,
it wore off, it was like a little bit of a cookie, a little bit more of a
like,
cookie,
yeah, 6 cookies. So,
6,000
yeah,
cookies.
mhm. So, yeah, so basically just, yeah, kinda ate my way back through that, and
Mhm.
then,
Any
I
idea
was
that you were
lis
gaining the weight back? Like
yeah,
what
totally. I would see, like, 10 to 20 pounds, I was like, "Okay, I really gotta, like, get this off because I don't wanna regain it all, I refuse to regain it all."
Mm.
So I would start, like, keto or intermittent fasting, those were kind of the 2 that worked the best,
Yeah.
so I would, hop on those for a little bit, but as you know, they're not sustainable, and so, um, yeah, so then right after I would get done with those, then it would just, like, come back on and more, um, and then you
What
just
did
get
it feel? Do you remember what I love a feelings wheel. What it felt like? Do you remember what you were saying to yourself? Or I mean, I don't know. I just know my feelings when I was getting it back. I was like, this cannot be happening. Like, I cannot do this one more minute.
Yeah, yeah. It was a lot like that and a lot like failure, like, "Oh my goodness, I'm failing again, I'm failing again."
Mm.
I wasn't gonna fail this, like, I was gonna refuse to fail weight loss surgery, and,
Deep. Yeah.
so yeah, and
I
then
know
I failed it.
that
So
pain is so real. You're like, I literally just went under a knife and I'm like gaining this weight back.
yeah, so yeah, so that kind of led me up to probably the last couple year or last year is probably when I had it all regained. And so then I was like, I've got to like movement was hard, putting on your shoes is harder, all
Yeah.
that type of thing. And I'm like, I have to do something, but if I do anything, I want to make sure it's the right thing and it has to be sustainable. And so I just kind of kept going and I like it didn't change eating, nothing. I'm like, I'm not doing anything until I find the right thing. And so in the fall last year, I was listening to the Sugar Summits
Mm.
and you were on there. And I just like really connected with your story. It's kind of similar to mine. And I was like, wow, I need to like get a hold of this lady and
How did
see
you know
what I
that
can do.
how did you have such why is mine so amazing, isn't it? How did you have such certainty around that?
I don't know. I think God just placed it on my heart that this was the right person, the right time, the right whatever.
Yeah.
And so I connected up with your office and just said, "Oh, is there, one-on-one counseling or what kind of the options?" And then she said, "Well, there's going to be retreat, and then if you go to the retreat, there's going to be a discount for this new thing called the All-In program." And so, yeah, that's how I got hooked up.
It's not though, because it's like that's like that story puts your fighter she doesn't even talk about it because like we hadn't ever met and you just signed up for it blindly. I'm so
Yeah,
curious
yep.
about that because at that point, All In was at a very different price point because I was running all of them. It was very expensive,
Mhm.
right? I know if
Yeah.
you're not watching on YouTube, her eyes just like rolled out of her head. It was very expensive. And I'd
Yeah.
never done it
Yep.
before. And you signed up without even asking to have a phone call about it. And I'm so curious about what made you take that brave. And by the way, like spoiler alert, like it worked beyond any both of our comprehension, which is why she's talking on the podcast today. But I'm so curious about because you're saying, even though failure is not a feeling, I'll take it for right now. You're like, listen, I've never felt a worse sense of failure as to when I was regaining all of this weight back from bariatric surgery. And I really relate to that feeling. It's the most powerless feeling I've ever had in the history of my life. Right.
Mhm.
Like it's just it's really painful. And the idea that you would try something else is so overwhelmingly fascinating to me. I'm so curious. Do you have any idea of what your thought process is that just said, I'm going to go, it was like $300 a week. You're like, I'm going to go spend all this money on this woman I don't know. Like what was that?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can relate it to really is just God put it on my heart, that was the right thing to be doing. It was super strong, and I felt a super strong connection, and yeah, I didn't know you from a hole in the wall.
From a
And
hole in the
so
wall.
and so I was just like, I don't know. I think your story was so powerful on the Sugar Summit, and I could relate like so much to it because you'd actually been through it. And most people, when they teach diet stuff, have not been through it. They just, yeah, quick fix kind of thing. I mean, sometimes they've lost a few pounds, but nothing, yeah,
Well, you know what? I
major.
think if they've lost a few pounds, they don't usually have training. And if they have training,
Right.
they haven't lost a few pounds,
Yeah,
and I kind of
yeah,
have that 1-2 punch while
yeah,
at DBT. And then also 325 pounds wanting to die and that feeling of failure that you're talking about and that feeling of suffocating fear that you're talking about that I understand in the depths of my soul. I really do. I think it's just so amazing. It's what, I don't know. You didn't read Breaking Up with Sugar again, but in that book, I dedicate the book to the reader because I'm like, literally, they're like, who do you want to date to get the book to? I was like, this person who is like deciding they're going to take another shot at this. Like, they're so amazing because I know how easy it is to feel like, yeah, not me. And meanwhile, the story continues to the night before the group starts. What happens, Elizabeth?
So I had DM'd Molly on Instagram and I just said, "Oh, I said, I don't know if I can do this. I don't, whatever." And
Yeah, but thank
Molly,
God, right? In this story, it isn't so straight. She doesn't like, and then it worked. She like DMs me like night before. She's like, I can't do it. I'm just kidding. This is too much. This is too much for me, right?
yeah, and so then you called me and we had a little chat and after the chat, you said, "What if God put this in your purpose for a life or put me in your purpose for a life to do something like this?" And I hadn't ever really thought about it that way and I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh yeah, maybe
You're
that's
like, oh,
why
that's that was that feeling. But I also think
yeah.
what was really interesting about that, which I want to talk about, because I want to talk about the how you did this. And so anyway, I also said, hey, I don't know if I'm ever running this group again. I got to her real scarcity. And she was like, okay, fine. But we had this 30-minute consultation before you decided you couldn't do it. And one of the things that I maybe mistakenly did in this is that I really said to you, I think, if it's up to me, I want to suggest, off all sugar, off all flour, off all sweetener, and off all liquid beverage. And I think you might have said yes when you meant no. What do you think?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think I'm kind of the peacemaker. I'm an Enneagram 9, so I like to make
I'm an Enneagram
peace with
7. Don't you know? Do you know what that
uh,
is?
that, yeah, the
Go
party
look it up.
person.
You'll be like, oh my God, that's so
Yes,
Molly. Um,
yes. Yeah, so I lost my train of thought. Um, yeah, I don't
you
know
were
what I
saying
was
you were a
gonna say.
peacemaker and that you had said
Oh,
yes when you meant
yes, yes. And I said, I told you, yes, that's what I wanted to do was the 4 bright lines, but I don't think I was quite ready to subject to that all quite in one, but it sounded good, so yeah.
so then when groups started, so then let's talk it through, because what are we on right now of all 4 bright lines? What day do you think you're on of all 4 bright lines right
Oh, I just looked it up before the podcast. I'm on 121.
now? What of all 4?
Mhm.
Okay. I love this story more than life. Want to know why I love the story more than life, everybody? Because if somebody tells you that there's one way, run away, and there is a combination, like a beautiful dialectical middle path of taking what the professional is telling you and listening to your own wisdom and finding the balance there. And so talk us through, because you're like, okay, I'm going to come and I'm going to be all in. And I need to sort of do that on my own terms. How did that go for you?
Yes. So I started with no artificial sweeteners was my first one. I decided when I started it kind of that I couldn't do all 4. I wanted to, but it was not a winning battle. So for
So
like
can you
2 or
talk
3
us through
weeks.
that? Can you talk us through that knowing? Because usually we have that knowing and our response to it is to just quit. So talk me through how I didn't, because like I was just your coach. So talk me through how I can't do all of those didn't turn into I can't do this program.
I think because like the first or second week, we all kind of took a vow, and our vow was not to cut and run anymore. And that's so huge because that's usually what I did. I would cut and run like I'd do it for 2 weeks or whatever and be like, oh, I cheated. Now I'm done, and would just give up failure. And so I think this time was a little bit different because I kept that vow in the back of my head, like I'm not going to cut and run. And so after 2 or 3 weeks of trying to do all 4, I was like, this isn't working. I need to do something else. So breaking it up into smaller things worked a lot better and I saw success quicker. And so I started with the artificial sweeteners, and that was super hard because I was a Diet Coke fan. And so I did that for like 2 or 3 weeks, artificial beverages or sweeteners. And once I got that going strong, then I decided to add in, I think I did no sugar, or actually, I think it was flour. I tried flour And actually flour is way harder than you think it's going to be. And then I think after that, I was just like, I have to do it all. I can't just be hopping around. This isn't going to work. And by then I had made up my mind. And so I started doing the all four. And at first I was like, wow, this is hard. And then I kind of like planned my slips, and you can't plan slips. It doesn't
Wait,
really
let's break
work.
this part down. So I want
Okay.
everybody to hear how she did this. Now, listen, there's some people that can't do it this way. This is why we can't join programs where they just tell you to do one thing, because human beings are all so different in our willingness, in our trauma, and all of this. So what you did was you tried to be all in, and you're like, this isn't working. Like, and the beautiful thing is you're like, and I'm not allowed to cut and run. So I can't quit. So I need to figure something else out. Right. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to do it kind of gradually. So I'm going to take one little bit at a time. And after a while, because success breeds success, you're like, you know what? I can do all four now. I had a little bit of success here. And then the second part of what you were doing is like, okay, I'm going to do all four, but I'm only going to do them 6 out of 7 days. And usually
Mhm.
what we say, or I always say is, we go for the gold and then we get the silver, but you were sort of like going for the silver and then like not placing in the competition, right? When you were saying, I'm going to try to do this for
Mhm.
6 out of 7 days, that 7th day was sort of an intentional makeup with, instead of breakup, it was like an intentional like visit to the sugar factory. Like, hey, little cookie, hang it, right? Is that what was happening
Mhm.
for you? Can you walk us through it and then how you were feeling when you were coming back?
Yeah. So I would set each week in all in, we set goals. And so I would be like, okay, 5 out of 7 days, I'm going to do this. And I would have success for a couple of weeks, but I was still on those 2 days. I was like cheat days, thinking of it more like that. And then pretty soon I'm like, it's not going to work. And pretty soon
But
you
like
were
why
like,
but like why didn't it work? Like what ended up happening that it didn't work for? I mean, because it actually sounds like I would be like very all in on that. Truly, I'm like, because when you're setting it, I was like, God, I hope that works for her. That would be so amazing if that could really work for somebody.
hmm.
But how did it not work for you? Do you remember?
Because I think it's too hard to flip back and forth. Because once you get that little bit of sugar on those 2 days, then it's kind of like, you got those cravings back and you want it more and more. So
And
it's a
so even though
huge
you
slippery.
weren't eating outside of those cravings, you felt the cravings higher. And so it was just like an icky way to feel for 2 days. And is that what it was?
Yeah, and I just think it just didn't flow at all.
That's the
And
most
so,
beautiful way to, that's my word for 2023, flow. It didn't. So tell me more about that. It just didn't flow. What does that mean?
it just wasn't working, basically. I
Mm.
mean, because every week I go to group and be like, okay, we'll try, and there's not a lot of, I mean, there's success in 5 out of 7 days,
A
but
thousand
I
percent.
just, I just wasn't quite feeling it. So
I think
once I
that's what
could
it, because
do,
I remember that. That's actually what I remember in group. You were like, well, I did 5 out of 7 days, but I'm not feeling good about myself. I think is what you were saying. Like, I'm just not feeling good. And then the group really all talked about how like the trying for 7 out of 7 was like its own version of self-love, kind of, right? Like you're like all in. And the other thing I always think about cheat days, I mean, when we're talking about a relationship with food and then we're talking about cheat days, does get a little tricky. And it idealizes food that doesn't love us back. And, I think that's where you were getting to. You were getting so healthy that it sort of, those cheat days didn't like suit your new stature. What do you think?
yeah, I think it was a lot once I had my mind frame I think it was kind of a mind frame thing too. And once I was like, okay, I'm gonna try for the 7 out of 7. And then once I found a little bit of success with that, that just kind of kept building,
Yeah,
which was great.
that's so interesting. So it's like, don't knock it till you try it. Like 5 out of 7 was great, but 7 out of 7 was even better,
Hmm.
which addiction
Yep.
is like really hating us right now. Addiction is like, no, 5 out of 7, don't leave me, don't leave me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you've had 7 out of 7 for 122 days. That's really
Yeah,
amazing.
I've maybe had a couple slips, but
Yeah.
yep.
Welcome to life. Um,
Yeah.
so what is different today versus like 130 days ago before we had even chatted? Or I guess it's
Kind of
not. I
have,
guess we had chatted. Let's say like now versus like 6 months ago. Like what's different in your life?
yeah, it's sugar and flour free and Diet
Well,
Coke free.
that's true. I
So
mean, but
it's
that's
just,
just food. Is there anything like
yeah,
emotional or spiritual
no,
or like,
yeah. I mean, I definitely have more energy. I can do things better. Your emotional health is huge.
tell me about your
Just
emotional health?
feeling,
What's different about it?
just feeling more confident and knowing that I'm actually, I've been doing this and I plus the food thing, and that's just huge right there. Those two things, just to boost, have that mental positivity, I guess, is what it really is.
Mm.
That you're meeting a goal and you're consistently doing it and you haven't given up.
But you say, I haven't given up. Say,
I
I
haven't
haven't
given
given up.
up.
Say it. Come on.
I haven't given up.
Yes, queen. That's right. You haven't given that's major for 5 months of your life. You haven't given up on yourself. That must feel, what does that feel like?
Yeah, it's a great feeling.
When
Um,
have you ever done that in your life?
mm, Pretty much. I mean, bariatric surgery, but that wasn't consistent. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what do you think is different about what you've done now versus, because I felt that way too when I had bariatric surgery. I was like, this is going to be it. Never going back.
Mhm.
What do you think are the difference between how you feel right now and how you felt post bariatric surgery?
I think I have a lot more connection now
Oh,
than I
say
had
more.
post bariatric surgery. So when you join the all in group, kind of everybody comes with the same story, but all in a different way.
Mm,
And having that connection that we can text or go to the Facebook group or, call each other and just say, hey, I'm having a rough day, or just checking in and say, hey, how's it going? Those types of things is huge.
yeah, having people that are on the path journey with you is so great because then you can also say to them, like, I really want to eat this thing, or I really am nervous about going somewhere, and they're there for you. So it sounds like you have great connection. What else do you think is
Yeah.
different?
Just kind of your outlook at life.
So your
It's
outlook.
my outlook on life. Um, yeah, I would say just more positivity
Hmm.
and confidence are probably the two biggest things.
That's pretty major. What's making you feel like, tell me, like what kinds of what how do you see that unfolding in your life? The positivity and the confidence.
I just, I just think that when you have those two things, it just makes a world of difference in your heart.
Yeah.
Uh, and you look at life. I mean, yeah, you just look at life different.
Well, how are you looking at life different?
Um, uh, yeah. Just being more grateful and thankful and knowing um, that I have the connection that I do have,
Mhm.
and knowing that every day is kind of a fight for my recovery, and knowing that I want to win that fight. And
It's
then
beautiful.
that kind of, yeah, leads to the positivity. And
I always think about with bariatric surgery, I was having a medical, I was engaging with a medical solution for a problem that was deeply spiritual and emotional, right? Like there was a part of my
mm,
morbid obesity that was absolutely medical, but getting my intestines rerouted didn't heal that spiritual emotional thing. What do you think about that?
right.
And it sounds to me like you're healing some of that learning and spiritual and emotional through the work you're doing now.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree that it doesn't cure your brain. And I think learning just these past few years is like you have to heal your brain.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a food thing. I mean, it is, but it isn't. But
It's all about the food and it's not about the food. Well, 'cause I mean, the other thing
yes.
that it sounds, I mean, I just know about you is that, we do so much learning There's so much learning in All In, and it sounds like you really took to that. What were there some of the things like in the teaching part of All In that you've really adopted?
I think radical acceptance was a good one. And opposite action.
Ooh,
They're kind of along the same
yeah, what's opposite
lines.
action? Love that. Tell us more.
Yeah, so it's doing the opposite of what you really want to do.
Yeah.
Um, basically.
Yeah,
So if you're really
basically.
hating something, you need to
Right.
just do the opposite of hating and loving it instead. I mean, obviously, you may not be able to do that in 22 seconds, but working on it is always
Well,
yeah.
sort of like it doesn't matter how you feel, it matters what you do. And that action really helps to change feelings pretty quickly. So, right. So for like, oh God, there's just like I'm feeling so scared of going to this party. Going to this party might be really helpful in making you less scared of it, right?
Hmm. Yep.
And like I'm really scared of giving up Diet Coke. Giving up Diet Coke kind of cures that fear sometimes. It's funny.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing, opposite action. Like the thing we're scared of, we oftentimes need to do, and that's where the freedom lies. So you're feeling super hopeful, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely more than I was 5 months ago. That's
I
for sure.
bet. I bet. What do you think people need to know about your journey that can maybe instill some of this hope that you have in them?
I would just say don't give up.
Mm.
Um,
Why?
and
That's a
because
platitude.
it's
I worry about platitudes. I always, when someone tells me, don't give up, I'm like, you don't understand how hard my life is. So yeah, don't give up. But like, why? Why should someone not give up?
um, because there's always an option out there. It might take a little bit to find it because I didn't find Molly right away when I was searching. It took quite a while. But yeah, God will place something in your life that will just click and you will be able to go on.
Keep your eyes open. Yeah. I'm like, so I'm so curious about, it seems to me like you have this real peace about you in your recovery now. And I'm curious about, it's a relationship. So what do you do to maintain your relationship with food and yourself now that you didn't do before? So one of the things that sounds like is connection. Like how do you sort of like know you're not going to go back? How do you know that to be? I feel very confident that's true about you, but how do you feel confident that that's true about you?
I think because I've seen the results in the past few months. I mean, I've released weight, which has been awesome, but it's not all about the weight. It's more my mind and like getting that final healing of the mind. I think I had done trauma work before this. And so I
Mm,
think that helped a huge amount. And then this was kind of
huge
my
amount.
final,
Yeah.
yeah,
So you had done a little bit of the emotional work that you needed to do to be able to be present for this particular round of healing.
yeah,
That
yep,
makes a lot of
exactly.
sense.
So this was kind of food was my last kind of healing relationship that I needed to kind of figure out.
Mhm.
So,
And it sounds like that thing I call the sacred vow is pretty it's central to your healing here, right? The don't cut because like what you said, I said, how have you been? You said, imperfectly 122 days. That's the sacred vow at work. That's the don't cut and run. So how do you integrate that into your recovery?
I think just keeping that in the back of my mind and every day knowing that you're um, fighting like a sugar addiction. I'm fighting a sugar addiction that I think just getting up and being like, okay, so today is whatever, and I'm going to do it. And because otherwise, the sugar addiction is going to take back over and I'm
That
going to
is
cut
really
and run.
radical acceptance
So,
though, right? Like you really deeply accept that this is the truth about you and then once you can accept that this is the truth about you, then you can make different choices. I mean, that's really perfectly radical acceptance. You're not saying, "Why is this happening to me? Oh, this is so unfair. Oh, I wish I could be a moderator." You're like, "Nope, all those things are true." And so this morning I'm going to
mhm,
wake up and I'm going to make the choice that serves me my highest and my best, right?
mhm, yep,
I wanna make you a
exactly.
promise because I'm almost 13 years down the road, so I'm just a bit farther down the road than you. I know it
Mhm,
feels like every day feels like a battle right now. And that actually makes a lot of sense. It stops feeling that way after a while. And you don't choose to go to war anymore. The war ends, and then you just have to maintain the land.
Mhm.
So there's my promise to you. Stay the course, and it just gets more intuitive, easier, softer, just and you're making choices. Right now, of course, you're making choices because the war is still active, but soon you'll just be making choices in what's going to help me to maintain my peace. I promise. I think you're really getting close to it too.
That's awesome. Thanks.
It's my gift. I promise. It's just, addiction's not a recovery from addiction is not a person's game. Cause as addicts, we're like, I want it
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
But down the line, it gets even better and better and better and better. I'm so excited for you. Is there anything else you
Thanks.
want everybody listening to know about you, about your story, about how you healed, about any of the magic of your life that you think can help to inspire all of us to make the best choices for our highest and best self today?
I would just say probably if you only can take a little step at a time, then only take a little step at a time. But lots of little steps will lead to one big step.
That's right. That's that's exactly right. Wow. Well, I love you. I'm so excited that I get to be a part of watching you shine. It's already been such a privilege, and I hope that I get to know you forever and ever.
Oh, thank you.
And thanks for coming and sharing so honestly with us. I love you.
Thanks.